my very best to get this job that I so crave.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Multiplex Fanzone debate. Your usual host, Tim Brzakala, could not be here, had a work thing come up. Your backup host for Multiplex has the worst internet in the world. So you're stuck with me. I'm subbing in, so it might be a little rough today, but that's fine because all we care about is the debate. Well, I do have, of course, two judges with me. First, I have Thomas Scully. Thomas, how you feeling today?
Doing good. I like it when two very passionate people come together and just argue about movies. That is pretty much what I experience every day, being friends with some of the people in this community.
Yeah, that's one of the things the internet is for, is arguing about movies, and the other one I won't talk about. Avenue Q knows about it, though. Andrew,
I got that.
Andrew, how you feeling today?
Good. After a good Avenue Q reference, I'm always in a good mood after that. But yeah, I'm excited for this one. Brooklyn, I haven't seen debate in a while. It's been a little bit, I think. And then with Tanner, like kind of new. Haven't seen a lot from him. So New Blood's always interesting to see, especially when going up against someone who's been around a little bit longer. But yeah, I'm very excited for this one.
I agree. So let's go ahead and get started by introducing our competitors. First up, we have Brooklyn Vail. Brooklyn, welcome back. How you doing today?
Yeah. I'm good. I'm excited. I used to get really nervous doing debates, but that was back when like Cody was in like his super duper beast streak, and like there were some other people. But yeah, I'm excited to get back into Fanzone. I think it's gonna be a good match. I'm like, yeah, similar to Andrew. I've this first time ever like kind of encountering Tanner, so kind of a wild card, but prepared nonetheless. Like he could very well be the next champion. So.
Well, we're happy to have you back, and Cody is not here to intimidate you as a competitor or as a judge, so you can relax on that level. And then let's meet his opponent, Tanner Hanson.
Hello.
Tanner, you're one of the newer guys around here. This is the first time I'm meeting you. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. First time, so a little bit nervous. More nervous about how at least one or two of my answers are probably out of left field, but I'm doing good.
Trust me, we've probably heard worse. Whatever you pick, we've heard worse.
All right. I'll take your word for it.
Good luck to both competitors. Just a brief rundown of the rules. We're going to give you the question. You are each going to have a 1 minute opening statement. Then there will be 5 minutes of freeform, and then you each get a 1 minute closing statement. We will give you a 10-second warning at the end of your 1 minute segments. Andrew is going to be a timekeeper. He'll pop in and let you know when you have 10 seconds left. And during the freeform, we will also give you a 1 minute warning, so you know how much time you have left. Are there any questions?
Nope.
All right, then. I will give you your first question of the day. It's going to be coming from the category of fandom. It was Tanner's choice of James Bond. And the question is, what is the worst...
Hold on, Brian. Real quick, before we do that.
Yes, we cannot skip the teddy clip. Tim would be so
Mark Wahlberg has to fight a teddy bear. That's the ritual that has to happen before every match.
It does. Now the fight is official. As I said, your first category is going to be in fandom. It is James Bond, as chosen by Tanner. The question is, what is the worst action scene in a Brosnan Bond film? Tanner, you're going to go first in your opening, and you have 1 minute as soon as I'm off screen. 1 minute from whenever you start talking.
All right. So I think the worst Pierce Brosnan action scene is definitely the racing the sun laser from Die Another Day. So basically, he just broke into this compound, found out who the bad guy is, understands their plans, and then of course he has to make a big escape, which basically is just running down a hallway, going up a zip line or going through a zip line or an escape wire, doing more running, and then racing the bad guy's sun laser as it's melting the polar ice caps in one of these like super speed cars, and then eventually goes over the cliff, rips off the back of the car, and then uses it to like basically glide across. So silly. So yeah, it's just a straight line through and through, and it's just running. very boring in my opinion.
Time.
Okay. Thank you, Tanner. And now we'll go over to Brooklyn. You have 1 minute from when you start talking.
All right, so I chose the final confrontation in The World Is Not Enough. This is where Bond and Renard are in the submarine, and then it basically turns like top side up, whatever. Pierce Brosnan as Bond, it oozed charisma. He was slick, and he had the golden eye, pun intended. It makes no sense to have him and Renard fight in a submarine that is essentially a Plinko board. It's stagnant with performances that blur the definition of trying, but I'll get more into that into my freeform. This is weirdly paced. There is just some cringy dialogue, and it doesn't fit the overall brand that Bond is known for. And I could seal my time.
Okay. From here, we're going to go into a 5-minute freeform. Just try and, be respectful. Don't talk over each other. Don't interrupt each other too much. Just if you're going too long, we'll jump in and let you know to let the other person talk. But all right, 5 minutes from whenever one of you starts talking.
You go first.
Oh, okay. Thank you. As far as the final confrontation in The World Is Not Enough, I can understand how it feels kind of off compared to the rest of James Bond, but I think The World Is Not Enough is really good, and it's kind of emotional through lines as far as like how serious they are about Renaud and Elektra and their whole relationship with Bond and all that. So it's supposed to be a very emotionally charged fight, but I can see how that comes off as awkward when it's mostly just the submarine is lopsided. They're basically fighting on a set of monkey bars. And the sub's about to blow up, so I can understand that.
There's just like these emotional arcs that you're talking about are pretty much killed anytime that Denise Richards is on screen. Like it's very much visible that she's looking off on a cue card. It's considered one of the worst acting performances ever, and it's not what that femme fatale is supposed to be in Bond. Which what you have in Die Another Day. Rosamund Pike is incredible in this. But even aside from that, like that ice thing, whatever, that ice boat skate thing, that is fucking cool. Like that, Bond looks fucking badass riding that. And yes, it will give you that, like the sun laser is like kind of crazy, but if you watch Die Another Day, like they're going full on ham and cheese. Like this, like there's very like innuendo based dialogue. It kind of harkens back to the Roger Moore era. But one thing that I will say to the judges is that sun laser fits the James Bond brand, because nothing else really makes sense. Like they're not going to send out wolves, they're not going to send out snipers. It's the right amount of cheese.
I can understand your point there. It definitely does fit very well with Bond's brand, especially the Brosnan era where you had GoldenEye's also a satellite weapon. And The World Is Not Enough with the nuclear sub. And you had Die Another Day with the sun laser. But as far as whether or not the acting is good, when it comes to action scenes, I don't find that quite as important, despite my previous point. The main problem I have with Racing the Sun, basically, is just that it's just him running or driving or gliding in a straight line. Meanwhile, in the submarine fight, you at least have some sort of action going on as far as an actual fight, and Bond actually looks like he's down and out because, again, it's the final confrontation. It's really cool. You're not sure how it's going to end. You know he's going to win, but you're not sure how it's going to end. Meanwhile, in the sun laser race, it's just, here's the sunbeam. It's slowly moving this way. And then Bond has to whiz across the ice in order to get away from it. And just like, I find that.
But at least the sun laser serves a purpose. Like you were talking about how there's like how the acting isn't really important. There's actually there's a scene in Years that kind of enhances that, because while he's racing it, fucking evil guy's henchman kind of looks over. It's like, oh yeah, he actually beat your time by 2 seconds, and it's like it still captures that. Like, god damn it, like Bond still bested me, even in that sense. I can see where you're coming from in the submarine, where it's like he might be down and out, but like he's swimming, and then you remember, oh yeah, he's in a Bond movie. Like, he's not going to die. He's not going to struggle. He's going to get out of it in some way, shape, or form. And even that scene is a bit rough because whenever the water's coming down, you can see him, he's clearly standing on something, which doesn't make sense for the previous shots because he was like swimming. He was swimming trying to get Denise's attention when, like, if that thing was there, he could have just stood there the whole time.
Okay. I don't know. As far as like for the submarine fight, I can understand where you like the little bit of comedy in the sun laser where he's just like, "Hey boss, you beat your time." But then with the submarine fight, it's also you kind of get mixed messages from that final bit where he's like, he's stuck in this little grated area, but all of this little air hose came undone, so he has to plug it in, and then he pushes the button and it just shoots the rod back into Renaud. And I'm like, it's a very silly way for the main villain to go out, but it's funny. So
the way that Bond should be killing any villain is with a pistol. It shouldn't be with like an air thing or like the MacGuffin, basically what the movie is. But yeah, the villain in that is also as
time.
Like,
all right, so we're going to go into our closing because this is Tanner's. He will close last. So Brooklyn, you are going to go first with your 1 minute closing. 1 minute from when you start talking.
Renaud in The World Is Not Enough already plans on killing himself. Like, this is like, I think this is meant to be a suicide mission. So my opponent's action scene just doesn't make sense. Like, this would be the one time where you don't necessarily kill the villain. You might bring him back in. My opponent's action scene is admittedly silly, but that is the entire movie. It is meant to be cheesy, given the dialogue previous with Halle Berry, Madonna, Rosamund Pike, and then even that surfing scene, like that is again fitting into what previous Bond actors have done before. My scene does not have that flow. It doesn't have the pace. It's hindered by a really bad Denise Richards. Pierce Brosnan has to carry the entire thing, and the kill shot is bland and has been done in like basically every other '90s action movie. I can see my time.
All right, and Tanner, you have 1 minute from whenever you start talking.
All right, I can concede the point that the sun laser scene is very fitting for the Bond brand, and that it is very enjoyable in its goofiness. However, in terms of the question, I don't think the question is whether or not it fits with Bond and whether or not it's a good action scene. I don't see a guy just racing across the ice in a car as an action scene. It's just driving. Meanwhile, the final fight with Renaud is actually an action scene. Stuff is going on. The stakes are actually high, not just whether or not too much ice melts and he falls through. He's still going to make it. He's Bond. But with the final confrontation, there's both emotional stakes with Renaud and Elektra's relationship, however well, good or bad it was performed, and also the fact that it's the final scene, so that's where the action really hits, and of course Bond finishes off in his signature stylish way.
Time.
All right, thank you guys. Judges are all going to write our winners on our board, and then we will go to each of the judges.
Oh, I forgot about that part. Wow.
Man. Too busy timekeeping. Everybody ready?
Yep.
All right, I'll go first. I think it was a decent debate from both players. I think that I'll say right up front, I did go with Brooklyn. I think that Tanner almost turned me at the end when we talked about how, you know, his is at least actually an action scene. You know, not only with the stakes snap, things are actually happening. There's actually a battle with another person, things like that. So he really almost turned me at the end. But I think that throughout the debate, there was a little bit too much of he kind of helped support Brooklyn's argument. He would concede points to him, and he'd say, I agree with you on this about yours, things like that. And so he kind of gave too much away to Brooklyn. So I voted for Brooklyn. Thomas.
Yeah, I also went with Brooklyn, probably for a lot of the reasons. Same with you, Brian. I think there was a lot of conceding on both sides that hurt both of their arguments. Tanner did a good job at the end of almost bringing me over to his side with the fact that that his is less of an action sequence and more of an extended car chase on ice. But I think there was a big missed opportunity to not mention the visual effects, the comparison of the visual effects. That is something that I think would have helped strengthen his argument. The effects in that sequence are probably bottom of the barrel in terms of Bond, whereas the scene with Renard is underwater in close quarters, not many special effects needed. So ultimately, I went with Brooklyn because of that.
Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, I also had Brooklyn. I think that while Tanner had a really strong closing, Brooklyn kind of argued better why his fit the Bond atmosphere, the Bond tone, and why it was more effective. So, yeah, that's why I would have given it to Brooklyn.
Okay, so Brooklyn gets the point for the first round. 1-0 in his favor. We're going to move on to the second category, which was Brooklyn's movie Warzone choice of actors and actresses. So he will open first and close last. The question here is, what is the best Mike Myers performance? As I said, Brooklyn, you will open first. 1 minute from whenever you start talking after we're off screen.
So I chose Austin Powers in International Man of Mystery. This is a love letter to spy movies, to Bond movies, like we previously talked about, as well as those Beatle-esque movies of just this like international celebrity being chased around. This pokes fun at those tropes, but also corrects some things in that. This is a performance that benefits from the script being written by Mike Myers as well. He works best with his own material, and this is the movie that ultimately kind of put him into stardom. He has enough of a charisma, he has enough of a charm, but he also has that silliness that you get from those like British Beatle-esque movies. I concede my time.
We briefly saw Andrew there. All right, Tanner, once I'm off screen, 1 minute from whenever you start talking.
All right, so I think my pick is definitely Mike Myers as the Cat in the Hat. I mostly just picked this because looking back on it, I consistently laugh at all my favorite parts. Also, it gives him, because it's such a cartoonish character, it gives him so much range as far as varieties of different characters. He can play different accents, different voices, and just sheer balls to the wall physical comedy, especially on the Cat's part, just because there's so much they can do with the practical effects, and plus with a decently written script, definitely allowed him to really flex his comedic muscles, and I thought it was very entertaining. Concede.
All right, 5 minute freeform starts whenever one of you starts talking.
Okay, so as a Canadian, I love Mike Myers, but God damn it, this is the downfall of his career. The Cat in the Hat, his performance is just a disservice to the character, like especially when you're coming off like Jim Carrey and How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and how much of a faithful adaptation that is, and how he kind of hyper extends some of those characteristic values. He turns the Cat in the Hat into something gross. Like he picks up like a little bit of steam at the end, but like there's lines like, "You pay this woman to sit on babies? That's disgusting. I'd do it for nothing." Like that's just not necessary. It doesn't have that like a whimsical kind of charm that we remember from Cat in the Hat. Instead, it's tropes that he ultimately takes from like Fat Bastard and the next two Austin Powers movies, and he just kind of carries those over.
Well, as far as the writing of the jokes, I personally found jokes like that very funny because it allowed Mike Myers to do something very unique with his character. Because unfortunately, other than the exceptions of like Jim Carrey as the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, Dr. Seuss has a very terrible track record of movie adaptations, at least. So, especially with how little detail you get from how the books are structured, because they're kids' books. Their main thing is their style, and they rhyme a lot with nonsensical words. So long as you keep those things, you're usually fine, even though it doesn't lead to good movies. But the fact that Mike Myers, simply by changing a hat and slight changes of costume, can create so many different characters all in one movie and have me laugh at every single one of them, I think that just shows how strong of an actor he is, even with a subpar script.
It may have you laughing, but even by your own accord, the best things in the movie aren't necessarily Mike Myers. Like you were talking about, like the practical effects and the set design. That isn't Mike Myers. We'll talk about Austin Powers for a second. And like his character is funny but also responsible, because like one of the bad tropes from like those early James Bond movies was kind of like how he was a bit misogynistic and like very forward in his advances, but they actually take time to correct that. It's like he admittedly stops advancing on a woman. He's like, no, like you're drunk, like this is not okay, which is definitely a callback like to those kind of bad tropes. With the Cat in the Hat, like you talked about all these different characters, but they're all kind of like iterations of Fat Bastard. Like ultimately, your quote unquote funniest scene is the one that he cuts his tail off, and they have like that curse kind of quick take, which again that's not the Cat in the Hat. That isn't rhyming or anything. That's just trying to get a cheap like adult laugh that ultimately your kids are going to ask like, oh, what was he actually trying to say?
Okay. As far as Austin Powers and whether or not he pokes fun of or simply embraces the archetypes that he is meant to represent, especially with international man of mystery, spies, and super celebrities. As the movie goes on and on, yes, he becomes more likable as it goes. Like you said, eventually he stops being so misogynistic and tail chasing, but from the start, he's very much just like, I'm a spy, but I'm also a complete moron, and also I can't remember which Austin Powers one it is, but the one where at the very start he's just like, oh, Japanese twins. Get that off the checklist.
That's Austin Powers, a gold member. That's not a movie that we're talking about.
My apologies.
That's okay. I'll bring up the physical comedy aspect that we're talking about. How my movie opens is with him being de-thawed. That pee scene is great. Urination. And then when it goes to the whole Swedish penis pumping enlargement thing, that's another kind of like satirical look at it, because like these agents are meant to be kind of like studs, but it kind of pokes fun at impotence, and like it kind of grounds him in a way. Yeah, the cat in the Hat again is just it doesn't fit the overall theme of Dr. Seuss and what they were doing. He does pick up like a little bit of steam on the end, but it's too late. He doesn't show a lot of respect to the characters. He's meant to be reckless.
The only thing I'd argue with the scene you just brought up as the urination complete, that's very much another script thing, going with your argument from earlier about acting versus script.
All right, so we're going to closings. Tanner, you're going to close first on this one. Again, 1 minute from when you start talking.
All right, so I picked Cat in the Hat because I thought it gave him a very large range of both impressions and characters that he can do, cartoonish levels of physical comedy, and as far as whether or not he embodies the Cat in the Hat, I don't really think that's necessarily what you need to judge when you're judging a performance. It's whether or not you can make it enjoyable. That's in my opinion the main part. Austin Powers is enjoyable, but I don't think it gives Mike Myers as much opportunity to show his variability in performance and just how many different things he can do with a character. The entire movie is Austin Powers being Austin Powers. The Cat in the Hat is just a complete ball of chaos, and it is very enjoyable up until the very end. So I concede.
Conceding those 2 seconds of time. Brooklyn, 1 minute from when you start talking.
Judges, I will remind you that before the movie was released, they had greenlit a sequel, and then the widow of Dr. Seuss was like, "Nope, this movie is so bad that we're not doing any more live action adaptations of my late husband's work." My opponent talks about the range of characters that he does. Those are all different flavors of the same fat bastard sandwich. The physical comedy that he does is rough in trying to get a quick little curse take, and ultimately that physical comedy is dependent upon the set design. Austin Powers pokes fun at things that we have already come to love. It is one of the best spoof movies. It has really nice time to breathe. They make a whole bit out of like Burt Bacharach coming into play. It's an incredible fish out of water style movie, and it's one that has set the archetype for just really silly characters. I can see my time.
Okay, well, 5 seconds.
All right.
That. Man, I'll have to go first on this one.
Yes, you will.
No. I also lost my eraser, so this may take a little time.
I have these things called hands.
I'm not getting those dirty. That's what Cody's for. Hey Brian, can you repeat the actual question?
The actual question was in the category of actors and actresses. What is the best Mike Myers performance?
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Thomas, you ready? All right. Andrew, you went last time, so we'll let you go first this time.
Son of a bitch. All right, this was actually pretty close. I think both players started to talk a little bit more about their movies than their performances. But I think if one person was able to knock down the other person's performance a little bit more, I think Brooklyn did a better job at knocking down Tanner's argument of the performance. So I think the offensive play was much better than the defensive play here, but I think Brooklyn took that.
All right. I think especially in the early parts of the debate, I think that Tanner actually did a stronger job because he was talking about despite how bad you might think the script is, how Mike Myers was able to have a large range of performance, things like that. And Brooklyn got a little bit into how they changed. He was able to address and change some of the misogyny and things that it was making fun of, which is more about the writing or about the movie, like you talked about, Andrew, than the performance. Although I do feel like in the second half of the debate, I think Brooklyn, especially in his closing as well, kind of came back and more addressed the performance of it. Although I do take issue with the fact that him saying that, Kenton had is just playing off the fat bastard thing over and over again, because even fat bastard he'd already done that thing in So I Married an Ex-Murderer and As an Allen. Mike Myers does a lot of the same things over and over. Let's just say that. But I did end up going with Brooklyn in the end. Thomas, your vote's not going to count this time, but what would you have gone?
Yeah, it was super close, but I went Brooklyn primarily for the same reasons that Barr said. I think in the end, Brooklyn was able to knock down the Cat in the Hat performance a lot better. I think both players definitely got away from the question as the debate went on, but I think Brooklyn was able to recover a bit better and focus on why Cat in the Hat was a much worse performance in relation to International Man of Mystery.
All right. So that does bring us Brooklyn up to a lead of 2-0. So Tanner does need to hit this one. He needs to win this category, which is his choice in movie Warzone of action adventure. And the question is, what action film would benefit most from a remake? Tanner, you're going to open first. You have 1 minute from when you start talking.
All right. I think the action movie that would most benefit from a remake today would definitely be the one starring Jet Li. I mostly think this because the story is very relevant, at least to current movies that are being brought out, especially since we have things like the MCU, the Spider-Verse, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Multiverse stories in film are starting to get more and more popular, and this provides a very unique way of looking at it. And also, even though it may not be Jet Li, we still have a very large variety of new action stars nowadays, especially martial arts actors who can bring the role a very unique twist. And I just think it's that mix of the timeliness of it, the variety of actors we now have available, and also it would definitely benefit a lot with updated special effects, because as is, the original movie suffers from having special effects equivalent to Terminator 2.
Okay, Brooklyn, give us your opening. 1 minute from when you start talking.
So the movie that I chose was Hancock. Hancock is a movie that was made basically 14 years too early. Came out in 2008 when a lot of superhero movies were ironically picking up steam. But this would cover kind of the overall frustration and the fatigue of the superhero genre. A community that's reluctant to have him to begin with due to the recklessness that he ultimately has while he's performing. Instead of veering off to the Charlize Theron subplot of There's Another, this is the opportune time to answer some questions brought on by recent events, like how would a hero operate during a pandemic? What happens if a community just begins to revolt because of those actions? There's a lot more that can be done, and especially with the MCU getting into Phase 6, the DC pressing the reboot button pretty well every 3 years. This is the opportune time to really cover superhero fatigue, but also cover some of the mental health issues that could come with being a superhero. I can see my time.
Cool.
It's cool, apparently. All right, so 5-minute freeform from whenever one of you starts talking.
So I'm really sorry, but your movie got made a couple years ago. It's called Gemini Man. It stars Will Smith, directed by Robert Zemeckis. They tried to do that clone thing again. It's just not gonna work. It doesn't have that draw, and there isn't anybody that's in Jet Li's level of charisma that where he needs to take on himself, because that was based on him taking on everybody else, and it's well, who do we have him face? Himself. They tried that. It's not going to work.
The only thing I'd argue about saying that it's basically just Gemini Man is that Gemini Man is a clone story, and it's also about hired killers and soldiers. Meanwhile, the one is something a lot similar to things like Highlander, or what I brought up earlier, Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's very much a story that's been done before, but I definitely think it has potential to be brought back in its interesting rendition of that story. Because with the MCU, it's just, here are different versions of the character, and they're just doing stuff side by side. And meanwhile, with things like Highlander and The One, it's more like, okay, how do these two characters differ fundamentally, rather than just here's Superman, but slightly evil. It allows you to change it up a little bit in order to combat said fatigue. Meanwhile, I understand how Hancock could be used to help understand superhero fatigue. However, we're also at a point where we're seeing a lot of movies and shows that are, rather than going through fatigue, are more going through a superhero cynicism phase, for lack of a better term, with things like The Boys, Invincible in a certain way. But anyway, sorry.
Okay, so first thing, Boys and Invincible does not count here. This is movies only. You were talking about how the multiversal stuff kind of plays. You're putting that movie on a pedestal with the old the movies that you were talking about, not necessarily up against Hancock. Hancock could bring up a lot of things. Like it hasn't like they've brought it up a little bit in Iron Man 3 and how it can have a toll on you, but you could really have this grounded sort of anti-hero that they've tried to do with things like Punisher almost, but a much more relatable. You could have somebody that is hated. Like you could recreate that asshole scene, but have it be like he's called like a social justice warrior or something where you can kind of update the script in that sense. I think one of the things about the one that doesn't necessarily that can't be like redone with it is that it was very much a 2001 metal movie. Like the soundtrack in that is great, and metal music right now just isn't booming enough for that to make sense. You would kind of have to change it from that dark sort of brooding tune to a much more either brighter tone or an entirely different genre of music overall.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're mostly talking about a remake here, not just a one-for-one recreation. So you can make changes to both the story and the tone in order to make do with the kind of music that's popular at the time or whatever you want to use. And also, you just brought up the Punisher. Like you said, this is movies, not shows. That's Netflix. I understand how that's.
Punisher has had a couple of movies though. Punisher Warzone.
Yes, but also those were not great movies either.
They're still movies though. That could be redone with a nice
Daredevil had a movie too.
All right. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah.
Okay. But yeah.
Yeah.
The one like that Highlander thing you were talking about has been parodied really well in Robot Chicken. So I feel like a lot of this audience today would just go back to being like, oh yeah, I remember when Lindsay Lohan killed everybody, thinking that she was the one. That trope has become very cliche. Whereas like the superhero fatigue, there's more angles to be brought about as opposed to what we got in the original movie, where this guy was just a douche for the sake of being a douche. There wasn't really any delving as to why he didn't like the community. There was much more to be fleshed out. Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's only 2 seconds left.
One. Okay.
So it's that awkward moment of there's not really enough time to say anything. All right. So we're going to go into our closings. Brooklyn, you are going to close first. 1 minute from when you start speaking.
The one would not benefit from a remake because these are tropes that have been tried already. He did mention everything everywhere all at once, but ultimately this would fall similar to Gemini Man, whereas the climax of the one is him fighting himself. It's introduced very early on in the movie. Call it clones, call it multiverse. It's still that era of science fiction. Hancock benefits essentially from a remake because it takes out the subplot of the story that doesn't make sense. We can focus on how a hero would interact with a possibly troubled community and how they might interact with him and the damage that he has caused doing these various actions. That's a movie that can be talked about, and especially in a world of disease, there is much more angles to be approached.
One. Okay.
All right. And Tanner, you're closing 1 minute when you start talking.
All right. So I believe the one can benefit from a remake because the reasons I listed earlier: updated effects, new cast, and you can work at the story from a different angle. Obviously we have plenty of movies that use a similar story structure, what with multiverse, everything everywhere all at once. This story format can still work. It is still popular in a sense. As far as using superheroes to do political commentary or societal commentary, seeing how superheroes would react with regular people is also something we've been seeing a lot of in recent years, especially from the MCU and with their related series, especially near Infinity War and Endgame, where we have to see more of the fallout from the snap and other things like that. So As far as action, again, I think there are a lot of good actors. Donnie Yen's a little old, but I think there are definitely a bunch of new up and comers who could fill the role perfectly for the one.
Time. There we go.
Love that sound.
Okay, Thomas, you're gonna go first this time.
Yeah. So for this one, I went Brooklyn. I think for the simple fact that from the jump, he was playing offense and was forcing Tanner to play defense on a lot of his points. He's a little bit more aggressive in talking about why the one wouldn't be as good of an adaptation or wouldn't work as a remake as well as Hancock did. He really didn't have to spend a whole lot of time talking about his own movie. He was able to perfectly articulate why the one would not succeed as a remake today, kind of doing a great job of deflecting all of Tanner's points, and again, like I said, making him play defense for the majority of the debate. I think Tanner did a good job at the end with his closing statement, trying to get it back, but unfortunately I think he just lost too much in the actual 5-minute debate portion. So this one I went with Brooklyn.
Okay, Andrew.
I actually went with Tanner on this one. I think Tanner played defense actually pretty well. There were a couple times where Brooklyn would bring up an argument and Tanner had like a good response. And I think that he brought up a really good point of how right now is the best time for this particular movie because of everything else that's going on. And I think Brooklyn, this is their best debate, both of them, this entire match so far. I think Tanner just eked this one out with just enough defense.
All right. I agree. I think this was the best debate. I think this was the closest one as far as trying to pick a winner. Right till the end there, I was still kind of going back and forth. I think for me, Tanner did a really good job of explaining, why, because currently the multiverse thing being trendy and how just in the years since then there's lots of advances, special effects, things like that, how it could be made as a better movie. Brooklyn, though, took a different approach of more plot-wise, like how his movie could kind of be updated to today and kind of have some commentary and things about this, the pandemic and people's reaction to superheroes, things like that. In the end, I did end up going with Brooklyn. So Brooklyn gets the point, and that means that your winner by way of knockout is Brooklyn Vail. Congratulations, Brooklyn. We are going to go into some post-match interviews, starting with our unfortunate second place.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Tanner Hanson.
There we go.
Tanner, you're new here, so kind of new to the format, kind of getting to know it. I think that you actually did a great job for a first-time debater. Just kind of getting to know how things work and kind of getting a feel for how things are done here. How did you feel about your performance today?
I definitely have to agree with the critiques you guys have had throughout, where I let myself be far too defensive with it, and that definitely cost me a lot as far as whether or not I could have won a point or two. But all in all, very enjoyable. Had a lot of fun talking about this. So
you feel like you want to come back again sometime and debate?
Schedule permitting, yeah, that'd be very fun.
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, you can learn a lot just from listening to critiques and also from watching other debaters. You learn a lot on the best way to do it. Let's go over then to Brooklyn. Brooklyn, you pulled out a win today, a knockout win today. How do you feel about your performance?
I feel really good. I changed up my style a little bit. Just try to go in a little more prepared with opening and closing. I tend to, my previous run, I tended to go a lot from from an emotional based perspective, and I feel like that's where I was able to kind of taken advantage of in terms of point getting and whatnot. But I was excited. Tanner kind of kept me on my toes, especially with the cat in the hat answer. Wasn't sure what the fuck he was going to throw out there. But great job. I I like the angle that he took with the one. That was one I wasn't really kind of expecting, and like I was like, if he gets the point, like that's like I definitely understand. But yeah, I'm ready to take my place as the eventual Fanzone champion.
I will agree. When I saw his cat in the hat pick, I was like, how is he going to argue this? But it surprisingly actually made a good case for it. So I'm told your next opponent will be the winner of Chadwick Webb versus Bill Carriola. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Please, Chadwick. I would really like for you to win. I would rather not have to debate Bill. I met Bill recently. Bill makes me laugh at the worst moments, so I can only imagine how he would do in a debate. I might even break glass in fear, but we'll see.
Yeah, and the bigger fear is that what kind of fear stuff is it going to make you watch to argue against it? But so we'll be seeing you back in Fanzone pretty soon. So with that, let's go to our closing statements from our other judges. Thomas, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, despite the 3-0 victory, it was a lot closer, especially in the last two topics that I think, the scoreboard would say. I think Tanner did a really good job, especially in his closing argument, of fortifying his points. But I think in the end, it just came down to who was the more aggressive person, who was on offense the majority of the time. Brooklyn kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing against Tanner's points. I think ultimately that's what gave him the upper hand in each and every one of them. But hey, this is a first time thing for Tanner. I think he'll be back with a vengeance. He'll be back even better. And Brooklyn's got a lot of confidence in him, so we'll see how he does in his next match. And if it's him and Bill, that is prime time viewing.
Andrew.
So Brooklyn showing why he was well renowned when the last time he played. Definitely landed on his feet. Not a lot of ring rust there. Tanner getting better and better with every round, so he's definitely someone that I think will definitely improve and get better over time, to the point where I definitely think that he will be a strong competitor. But once again, Brooklyn just showing why he's one of the best around.
I agree. So that's going to do it for us today here at Fanzone. I would like to thank Thomas Scully, thank Andrew Barr, thank our competitors, Tanner Hansen and Brooklyn Vail. Thank you for putting up with my janky, awkward substitute hosting. Thank you, Andrew, for hosting the stream and running the time. And we'll see you next time on Fanzone. Roll that.
There we go. Thank you very much. Please come again. We have a lot more groceries.